Why don't we start with the George Segal piece?
Okay. This piece will be enjoyed by Nancy and Marshall Levine, since it's part of their collection. And this piece is, I dreamt I was a model for George Segal. George Segal was a sculptor who worked in plaster cast figures environmentally. He was an early hero of mine in terms of the kind of environment, kind of work that we can go on to the piece is called Poet, Painter, Publisher. It's about Lawrence Ferlinghetti. And most people know him from the Beat Poet generation, store in Los Angeles, but also he was a painter for 60 years. And he just passed away this year at 101. He's working right at the end. So now we'll kind of move over to this piece. And this piece is called Four Sketches on Dances by Alvin Ailey. And it's a little unusual for me because I decided to kind of abstract dance movement into the shapes, and I chose 4 different dances. The center figure is obviously Alvin Ailey, and he was a African-American choreographer who started a company in the 1950s, and the company is still going today under its probably 4th director after he passed away. This next piece is called Chaplin. It's about Charlie Chaplin, and it focuses on several aspects of films that he did. Hard Times with the Dance of the Biscuits, or the bread rolls. The other scene, famous scene where he eats his shoe, the scene from Modern Times. And what a lot of people don't know is that Charlie Chaplin wrote all the music for all of his films, even the silent films. He wrote the piano scores that were played in the theaters. And he wrote the music for Smile, Smile, Though Your Heart Is Breaking.
Charlie Chaplin
wrote that, and Nat King Cole kind of made it famous.
For Chaplin.
Yeah. And then this is a piece, it's called Hawking. It's about Stephen Hawking. And it focuses on 2 things. One, his scientific work in astrophysics. And there are holograms in this piece. And I don't know that hologram will work on the video feed, whether it shows the 3-dimensionality of it. But the 3 holograms show the Big Bang Theory singularity, which is the red one. And that is where matter disappears into a black hole. And the 3rd one is converging black holes. The large cast glass heads show the progression of his ALS. Stephen Hawking had ALS for 50 years, which is unheard of. Most people, sad to say, pass away after just a couple of years. The 6 figures surrounding are scientific influences, including Galileo, Isaac Newton, Copernicus, Einstein, Ralph Penrose, who developed the Big Bang Theory with Hawking, and Edwin Hubble. So Cheryl Lapin will be familiar with this piece. This piece is called Artemisia, and it's about the Baroque painter Artemisia Gentileschi, who in the last 25 years has become pretty well known, but before that, not so. And she was pretty much the only female painter to emerge from the Baroque period. The 4 colored glass heads are people who, the first one is her, the second one is her father, Orazio Gentileschi, who was a painter also and fairly well known. The next one is Caravaggio, who was her influence because of the chiaroscuro. And the last one was Galileo, who she had a correspondence with. This piece is called Tectonic Shift. It's about the ceramic sculptor Peter Voulkos, who was from California, and he was pretty much the ceramic artist who took ceramics from making pots on a wheel to gigantic sculptures. And initially what he did was he took wheel-thrown objects and smashed them together, built large kilns and fired them. And then as time went on, they just became sculptures that he started from scratch and built large. They weren't necessarily wheel thrown, but the glass is in the form of one of his ceramic sculptures, and it's in 4 layers thick. And I wanted to show the juxtaposition of his wheel thrown work and his large scale hand built work. This is kind of a personal piece of mine. It's called Maxwell Street. Maxwell Street is a street in Chicago where there were Jewish push carts and haberdashers, and black blues musicians played in the street. There was a symbiosis between the two, because the merchants would extend the extension cords from their shops so that the musicians could plug in their amplifiers and microphones and set. And I tried to focus on 5 blues musicians who never became famous, although Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, Lightning Hopkins, and several others, you know, when they came north, started working on Maxwell Street. But these guys stayed there their whole life and worked for tips in the street. There's Stovepipe Daddy, Arvell Gray, Hound Dog Taylor, Carrie Bell, and Blind Jim Brewer. This piece is about Christo and Jean-Claude and a project that they started, raised $15 million to cover all of the environmental studies and all that. And the project was to lay these silver kind of mylar curtains over the Arkansas River in Colorado. And it would be done over 5.6 miles of river in several sections. So what I tried to do is get the idea of the river flowing through there. This piece is called Gesamtkunstwerk, and it's about the artist Joseph Beuys, German artist who was a performance artist, who was a sculptor. He worked a lot in felt, and he was an incredible teacher and very influential on the post-war generation of artists. This is a brand new monumental piece of mine about Anselm Kiefer. Anselm Kiefer is also a German artist, although for the last 25 years or so, he's been living and working in France. He does very large monumental paintings and sculptures. And this piece is called N'oublie pas, and it means don't forget. He was born right at the end of World War II, and a lot of the messaging in his work is to not forget the Holocaust and the atrocities that were committed by Germany in the 1930s and 40s. And you have the railroad tracks disappearing into the horizon. And then on the outside, you have empty dresses, which were the dresses of the women when they disappeared. And then you have the wings, which were the wings of the phoenix of, rising up from the ashes of the horrible things that occurred. French artist Yves Clyde, he's famous for the color blue, and that he invented and held the formula for many years. I was lucky enough that in 2018, when he would have been 90 years old, his family released the formula for the color to a French paint company, and I was able to buy the paint and actually use the real Yves Klein blue. And he died at 32 years old. He was a visionary. He thought he could levitate. So in 1960, he jumped off of the top of a wall, and it's the artist who leaps into space. And it was before Photoshop, but it shows him, leaping into space. And basically it was two photographs, one superimposed on the other. But in the photo where he jumped, there were guys holding a mattress that he dived down. But there's sponges in his paintings. And so I put sponges, these are all wood. I made these wood sponges and I put them on the floor. So instead of him leaping into space, he's leaping into the sponges of his paintings.
Which I think was a brilliant thing for you to add.
This is a piece about Karl Walker, a contemporary African-American artist. And she used the format of silhouettes that were popular in the mid-19th century. And she told stories with them. Oftentimes it was slave master and slave woman. And what I tried to do is capture in many of the female images, there were ideas of overcoming the master-slave relationship and showing power. As you can see, the woman in the top throwing a bomb and the attitude of some of the other ones, yet you still see one of the figures being chased by the dog. And the idea of so-called queen is that Karl Walker became very famous, but she never was able to, like most or all African Americans, escape the prejudice. And when she's walking down the street, nobody knows that she's famous. And she gets the abuse, which is, so she wanted to let people know that, just because she's on this exalted plane, she's, doesn't escape.
She's suffering too.
She doesn't escape. And this piece is very different. And outside of the Fort Wayne Museum of Art is a sculpture by Marc de Souvero called Helmholtz. And I've always wanted to do a piece about Marc de Souvero and never really came up with the way to do it. Well, when Charles and I started talking about doing the show, I thought that would be perfect. I could use the Helmholtz piece as a jumping off place and do the sculpture about Marc de Souvero. So I picked several elements of the piece and try to just capture the essence of it and who Marc de Souvero was, as this incredible man of steel who was injured gravely in an accident in New York in the 1960s, and was able to come back and walk and become one of the great artists of the 20th and 21st century. He's a poet in steel is the kind of the best way that I can put it. We'll finish up here, and this is a piece about Ai Weiwei, which also has holograms. And when I made this piece, Ai Weiwei wasn't allowed to leave China. So the holograms that I made for this piece are first stage holograms, which means that the 3D image is captured behind the glass. So you look in the glass and you see him behind. So he's kind of a prisoner behind the glass. In the Stephen Hawking piece, because the Big Bang explodes out into space, I made those in the second stage holograms, which allow them to project in front of the glass. And one of the famous works of Ai Weiwei is a triptych photograph where he drops a 6th century Han Dynasty vase. And you see the 3 photographs of him holding the vase, the vase in midair, and then the vase broken on the ground. So you, on the top, you have the whole vase, and then kind of the ephemeral vase flying through the air. And then on the ground, you see the smashed up bits. And what I did was I actually made the vase in wax, put it in the freezer, and it got extremely brittle, and then dropped the wax on the ground, and I cast the shards to make the... So thank you all for visiting the show. Thank you, Charles.